Dober Den. Let's start healing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and I just greeted you with Dober Den, which is hello in Czech. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. That is what we know here at Let's Start Healing. And before I introduce you to our guest today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the podcast, Let's Start Healing, on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts. Follow us, follow the Let's Start Healing podcast on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and send me that email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. I want to know what you think about the podcast. If you are enjoying the guests that we've had on, we have such a variety of guests, and I'm pretty excited about the guests that we have lined up in the coming weeks. And also today, our guest today is Randy, a defense attorney, and we are just using his first name to protect his anonymity because he is in a 12-step program. But you know how sometimes you meet people who they have no self-awareness? Well, Randy has a great deal of self-awareness, and it is just so enlightening. He is a very lighthearted guy and then a very introspective person at the same time. And he touches on some interesting insights during our conversation, one of them being codependency. And that's something that really resonates for me because that's something I've had to very much work through in my life and in my relationships. And what I learned many things, or had many aha moments, as we like to say sometimes, in talking to Randy. And one of them was when it came to codependence. And I guess I think of it as being one way. And then in talking to him, I realized that codependency can surface in more than just one way. So it depends on what we are, that particular thing that is an issue for us in our lives. So I'm excited for you to get to know Randy. Let's meet him. Let's get started, and let's start healing. Welcome, Randy.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So let's just talk about your spirituality a little bit.
Sure.
How would you describe your spiritual path?
How would I describe my spiritual path? Well, it started with no spiritual path. That's how I would say for the first 40 some odd years of my life, I don't know if I would describe myself as an atheist, because I think to be an atheist is almost to be like, it was too much work to actually be that dogmatically entrenched in the idea that there wasn't a God. It's just that I didn't think about God.
No, but where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and my father, just from a spirituality / religious viewpoint, my father is Jewish, my mom is Presbyterian, and now I was technically raised Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed and all that stuff, but religion, God, spirituality just never entered our household. I think that the way to reconcile the fact that we had two parents from different religions was to just have no religion in the house. And so what I was brought up to believe was success, this professional success, making money, making your way in this world, making sure that everything was taken care of in this world, making sure that you dot every I, cross every T. There was no anything else.
Nothing greater than you.
Nothing greater than myself. In a way, we talk about the phrase higher power. I was my own higher power for the first 40 odd years of my life.
40 years. When you look back on that time now, do you think like, did you feel like a heaviness or?
Oh gosh, yes.
Were you aware of that? Or?
No, that's so interesting. It's almost like you live with the anxiety and fear of being your own God and your own higher power. And let's face it, when all you have is yourself to rely on, that is a very, very scary proposition. But looking back, I think I got so used to the constant low-level anxiety and fear that I didn't even notice it.
You were like numb to it, kind of.
You know how it's like you don't know that you feel good until you finally feel good, And it was a little bit like that. It wasn't until I started exploring a new way of looking at life, a spiritual way, that I look back, I'm like, how the heck did I ever live like that? It just became part of the deal.
And so what happened?
So to answer that question, I'll backtrack a little bit. Looking back on those first 40 some odd years of my life, I think what I did was I squelched the fear by filling it with a lot of different things. It could be professional success. It could be getting praise from others, getting people to like me. It could be relationships with women. I made those relationships my higher power. Making money, getting awards, all these earthly things I filled it with. And then I hit a point in 2012 where, it's funny, I'm trying to remember how it actually happened, but I just hit this moment where I just ran out of something. It was like, because at the moment, my sort of drug du jour was my work. I was immersed in my work, and I had professional success, and I was getting pats on the back, and everything was great. And then we were living in Los Angeles at the time. I moved to Atlanta, and I had to leave my business behind. And I just realized when we got here, oh my gosh, that was my thing, and I don't have anything to fill it with. And it's almost like, imagine if you have this hole inside, this God-sized hole in you, and your whole life you're filling it with this, and you fill it with this, and you fill it with this, and then the last thing you fill it with goes away, and there's nothing left.
You can't fill it anymore. And
you're left with that hole. And for the first time in my life, at age 41, I guess it was, I had to finally face the hole. And
so were you not working for a minute when you got here?
I still was able to work, but not to the same
intense.
extent, and all the trappings and the prestige that came with it kind of went away.
Were you you were married, and your wife, was it her job that brought her
that's
here?
what brought us here. My wife was a news producer, and so she got a job here, and we decided to take the plunge and move. And it didn't hit me until we got here just how attached I was to these things. But and
it's an adjustment. Atlanta's not LA.
That in of itself was an adjustment. Yes, you're right. But you know what? If I got here and I had everything to sort of fill that hole, it would have been okay.
So what did you do? What did you realize?
So, I was at a place of, it's so funny because I hear people's stories of hitting bottom, that moment that they call rock bottom. And some of them are just, extraordinary bottoms, death and jail and all these things. And I almost feel a little sheepish saying that was my moment of rock bottom. You're like, so Randy, your moment of rock bottom was your job wasn't quite as prestigious as it was. But to me, it felt like a rock bottom. And I think the one common thing that people have in rock bottom is that moment of like, I've exhausted all my own resources, my own power. What do I do next?
And, because I'm thinking about, and I was thinking about this morning, just you were in control. And so like if we think about something greater than us, we think about God, that's a surrender. That's something we have to give up control.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great way of putting it. I was so addicted to control, and all of a sudden I don't know what to do. I'm out of control.
Right.
I have this pain and this sense of emptiness, and I don't know what to do.
Were you afraid?
I just wanted the pain to stop. I wanted something. I was willing to do anything. I was in such pain. I think pain sometimes can be such a great motivator. I think that's why rock bottom for a lot of people can be the moment when things start changing. And so that intense emotional pain was so intense. I was willing to do anything. And I got myself into a 12-step group at that point. I have some alcoholism in my family, and so I went to a program called AlAnon, which is a 12-step program for friends and family members of alcoholics. The funny thing about it is a lot of people who come into AlAnon, there really is an acute problem of alcoholism. Like they have a spouse or a child who is drinking and they don't know what to do about it. That wasn't my problem at the moment.
Right.
I just needed something. I was like, well, I have this alcoholism in my family, so
but that's your qualifier.
It's my qualifier, but it's like this'll do. I'm just willing to do anything. And I also got myself into some therapy. I was the willingness. We were talking about willingness in another meeting. The willingness was there because the pain was so intense. So I think that getting into AlAnon, going to that first AlAnon meeting, and all of a sudden being introduced to this idea of a higher power, a God of my understanding, foreign to me, but I was in such pain. I was willing to even entertain the idea, and I think that's where my spiritual journey really started.
And that had to be perfect in a way because it wasn't trying to push anything on you, any real ideology, right?
So that's exactly right. I would have resisted any dogmatic ideology. Frankly, I would have resisted just any idea of God or a higher power unless the circumstances of my life forced me to it. In a way, I've heard AA speakers and Al-Anon speakers talk about alcoholism being a blessing, because what is a blessing except for something that leads you back to God, where you came? So in a way, the fact that I had some alcoholism in my family and the fact that I had hit this strange bottom was such a blessing for me, because it just led me in a whole new direction that there's no way I would have done myself.
Yeah, I'm wondering about like that first day. Like, did you feel like just some relief? Like, did something sort of just make you relax as you were listening to people, or do you remember what it felt like?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, and that's an interesting question, because a lot of people will come into that first meeting and they'll hear the exact thing they needed to hear. See, I got into Al-Anon because I figured, well, I know 12 steps, they talk about God and higher power. So I need to find a way to get this, whatever this God, higher power is, to get me my career back to the way it's supposed to, to just make sure, to get everything back to the way it was. So all of a sudden I get to that first meeting and they're talking about letting go. They're talking about surrendering even more.
You're like, what the what?
I'm like, no, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to sort of like to the extent I'm even willing to believe in a God, I want that God to be kind of like my genie, who's going to sort of just get everything back. And I'm not hearing that.
Oh my goodness. So what were you doing in LA?
So, for my profession, so I am by profession a criminal defense attorney. I do post-conviction work, so I help people who have already been convicted of crimes try to appeal their convictions or to try to get out. And you know what, I'd started my own practice, and you know, I was doing really well. I was on the top of the world. I did a lot of news. I was on national news programs.
Yeah.
I had the respect of my colleagues. I was getting written up in like the top lawyers in LA magazine. I mean, this was the height of my ego. In fact, you know, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but about a month before we moved to Atlanta and I hit that bottom, I remember looking in the mirror. This was the height of the ego. And I remember looking at him and being like, yeah, man, you have arrived. Like you are, Rainey, you are at the top of your game. And as they say, pride cometh before a fall, you know?
And I'm like, what's wrong with saying that? But you weren't in the right place when you were saying
it was all just, it was all external. That's the thing. It was like all of my self-worth and any kind of love I could feel for myself, and I didn't realize this at the time, was all outside of me. There was nothing. I was empty inside. And so my happiness and my well-being and serenity, if you even want to use that, was all dependent on how many people were giving me attention, how many people were liking me. Oh, did I win this case? Oh, I can feel good about myself. Oh, I lost this case. I can't feel good about myself. Oh, I just got an award. Now I can feel good about myself. And so everything was external.
So if you don't mind my asking, how did that affect your family life in terms of, like, were you able to give the love, or was it not what it is now, for example?
You know, one of the reasons or selling points for the move to Atlanta was my wife had said to me, I was getting so wrapped up in my work. She was noticing how we were not spending time together. Work became my end all be all. And she said, you know, our marriage isn't going to last if things keep going like this. And, you know, that was enough of a wake up call that I thought, you know, she got this job in Atlanta. Okay, if that's really what's at stake, I'm willing to make the move. And besides, I'm sure once I get to Atlanta, everything will be great again anyway. And then it wasn't, you know. So things were not. I was losing myself.
And so then what can you describe what took place in terms of you just kind of moving on down the road and discovering God?
You know, it's so funny is, so as I mentioned, I thought getting into AlAnon, getting into a 12-step program and sort of finding this higher power would just sort of get me back everything that I lost. And so as I'm sort of in the first year or two, I'm doing the work because I'm still in pain, and the pain is providing that willingness to. So I'm working with a sponsor. I'm working the 12 steps, but I'm still pursuing. I'm still waiting, you know, to find other things.
Right.
And you know what's funny? Every other outside way of me sort of getting back some of the thing I lost just didn't work. It was almost like God knew that the moment, if he were to ever give me back some of that ego stroking stuff that I didn't have anymore, I was going to be out the door of AlAnon, and my spiritual path, I was going to be doing a U-turn back to the way it was. So it was like nothing worked out for me, and thank heavens nothing worked out for me, because it just the more I failed, the more things didn't work out, the more I was like, well, I'm still in pain. I still got to keep on this spiritual path. And so what happened was, the more I worked in AlAnon, the more I worked the steps, the deeper I got. As I got to year 1, year 2, and year 3, I started the idea of God and a higher power, and the idea of finding love and self-worth from within started to take effect slowly. All of a sudden, I started being exposed to this, that maybe there is another way. and again, it took a couple years in the program for me to even start entertaining that idea. But what I noticed, Adrienne, was once that idea started growing, like just like a seed into just a small little flower, I started noticing some peace coming from that. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. You mean I can actually find peace from within, even if nothing's going the way I want it to go outside, even though no one's singing my praises, even though, I'm not getting what I want? That's different. And that's kind of cool. So, hey, how about now that I've tasted a little bit of that serenity, now let's keep going a little bit further, and a little bit further and a little bit further. And then I started expanding, people in AlAnon would turn me on to other spiritual disciplines, and other spiritual other books and other ideas, and it started growing.
Well, so what was your practice? Would you pray? Would you meditate? Was it reading?
That's part of the 12 steps. Step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. So my sponsor said, just start doing it, man. And it's the kind of thing, it's when you're in enough pain, you're willing to just do what you're told. Even,
Yeah, that's true.
It really is.
That's true. Did you feel like you might not survive?
Yeah. Like emotionally, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't eating. And I didn't know I didn't know how to feel better.
Right.
So my sponsor said, well, just do this. Start.
Was praying strange?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was totally. I didn't know what I was praying to. He was just like, well, just pray to it. Whatever works for you. That's one of the beauties of the 12 steps is that step 3 says it's a God of our own understanding. So it can be whatever works for you in that moment. They say in the program, if you want to pray to this table, if that works for you, that works. And what I've noticed too, as I've continued on, my understanding of a God has evolved, and grown to match my own spiritual growth.
So what is your knowing of God right now?
So right now, I'll answer that by saying when I first got in the program, I saw God in sort of this dualistic way. Like there was God and me, and I was a separate entity, and that worked for a little while. I still, it's like there's this, not that God was a bearded man in the sky, but it was a separate entity that's sort of like running the universe and making sure everything's okay, and that worked for a while, but there still was, as I grew, there still was something missing in the idea that there was a separation between me and God, because if God's A and I'm B, God may just say at one point, you're not doing what I want you to do, or I'm tired of helping you out. And so, what's really helped me recently, and this is my, after the 12 steps, I got into the Course in Miracles. That's really helped me reformulate my idea of God. Now I see, I have what the Course would say is a non-dualistic idea of God, where God and me and you and everything is all one.
Right.
And so my sort of latest version of God without the space between us, without the separation, that really works for me now. Like that really makes it's like, it's not, I was going to say, like, now I know God has my back, but it's not even a question of that. It's, we're the same back.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah. And in doing this podcast and talking to people, I've learned that not so many, but some communicate with God and with no word. But I'm bringing this up to ask: is it nonverbal, your exchange with God?
That's such a great. I'm so glad you brought this up. So one of the things that the 12 steps teach, and the Course uses this as well, is it both the Course and the 12 steps refer to these blocks between God God and me. It's almost like
that you create or I create.
Yes, that these attachments, these things, my work, my relationships, all these things that I use to put between me and God. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they refer to it as the sunlight of the spirit. One of the great things about the 12 steps is steps 4 through 9. So 1, 2, and 3 sort of help get you at least started with this idea of a God, okay, which is great. I didn't have a God, but beforehand, really, other than myself. So 1, 2, and 3 got me sort of attuned to the idea that there is a God. Well, the problem is, even at step 3, I still got all these other things that I have used throughout my whole life to fill the hole, and I'm attached to them, and I want them, and if I want them, they're in the way of God. The Buddhists talk about you can't ride 2 horses at once. So if I am so focused on making work my higher power or my God, then the God of heaven, the true God,
right?
I can't access that because I'm blocked. So to answer your question about the thoughts about how God communicates with me, I'll never forget my the first time it happened. And I'm talking, I would take walks with my dogs, and I would always listen to like the radio or like talk or something like that. And one day I was about a year into program, and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to listen to anything. I'm just going to be silent. And as I'm walking, all of a sudden it wasn't a voice, it wasn't words, but it was a thought that came into my head that I never had before, that told me that I am codependent. And thoughts started going further about what codependency is. And as I'm having this thought, I'm like, oh my God, this thought is right. I am codependent because I have such codependency with and I was like, oh my God, I never knew that about myself. So I had this thought that just came from somewhere. So I thought, well, geez, man, maybe the next time I take a walk with my dogs, I won't listen to the radio again. And so for the past several years, I have, sometimes it's walking, sometimes it's in the shower, sometimes it's just sitting on my back porch looking at the trees. But I have had so many enlightening thoughts about these blocks, about these things. Just recently I had one. I had this thing around work, and I didn't know I had this attachment to this one aspect of my work, and it's tied to my perfectionism, and I didn't even know it was there. It was a real blind spot. But the other day I was just sitting on my back porch, and I was like, oh my gosh, I see how much I am attached to this aspect of my work. I didn't even know it. And so I find that God or the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to say, constantly communicates with me. But for me, it's thoughts. I don't actually hear like an actual voice.
And I have a friend, and she uses the word available. Like, she makes herself available, and that's what I feel you're doing. You have made yourself available. You don't even have to say, I'm available. You've made yourself available. And so it just comes to you.
It does. And sometimes like I'll intentionally like, okay, God, I'm sitting down. I'm ready for this next great insight. And it doesn't happen. It's like when I'm like, like on my way to pick my daughter up from school, and I'm like, oh my God. And I have to remember this so I can get back home and write it down,
Exactly. So if you could talk about codependency, that word used to, like, I'm codependent. I can be codependent, and it's something I've tried to, move on from. But I didn't really understand what that meant, and so what I came to was a significant part of it. I think for me is enabling, and I am. It's like a cycle. I enable, so that makes me dependent on you, and you dependent on me. Is that accurate? Because I haven't looked it up or anything. This is kind of like what I came to. So.
There is that. That's That's a wonderful way of explaining it, Adrian. Yeah. My codependency, it's, I always like the analogy of Superman. So I need to be super. This shows. This is all going to be egoic. Because at first, when I first thought of codependency, I thought, well, my problem is I just want to help people too much. No, this was all ego. In order for me to love myself, I felt that I needed to be Superman, and I needed to save everybody. The more people I saved and fixed and helped, the more I could pat myself on the back and prove to God, because now I started believing God, prove to God that I'm worth the space that I'm taking up. I didn't trust my own just inherent self-worth. That I didn't trust the idea that I'm worthy of love just by being. I have to prove it constantly. So I'm going to prove it by saving and fixing. So, well, Superman, in order to sort of do his thing, he needs a Lois Lane. If there is nobody who needs saving, then he loses his function. So I needed people in my life to be broken, and so that I could fix them. It's like my joke is that I'm a walking solution looking for a problem, and
wow,
yeah, and so and the thing is, the lie I would tell myself when I'd meet particularly women, like I needed women who were damaged in some way. And now the lie I would tell myself is, oh, well, I got to fix them. I don't really want to, but since they're broken, I have to fix them. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, on some unconscious level, I sought out their brokenness so that I would have somebody to fix. And here's the real sort of insidious thing about this, is that I think unconsciously, I never wanted them to get too well either, because if my fear was if they got well and then they would no longer need me to fix them anymore, and then what I would lose my function. So my codependency is all about this egoic need to prove my self-worth by fixing you, and then you'll thank me and tell me how awesome I am. So that's how my codependency kind of manages itself. Didn't even know what was going on until that one morning when I decided to turn the radio off and just walk in silence.
And then that had to be such a major shift for you.
Yeah.
Was it, and then it's habitual too, right? So was that hard to kind of say, oh, I'm doing it again?
Oh, and I still do it. And I can, there's a great book that says we're never recovered. We're constantly recovering. I've had 40 some odd years to develop these habits and these ways of acting and ways of thinking, this belief system that had never been questioned. It's not going to just go away because I decided to pick up the big book and the Course in Miracles.
But I'm having a little revelation when you just said that, because something I've come to realize is this whole thing about being connected to God. It's a daily practice because of our egos. So it's the same as what you just said, that 12 steps are about, like you're constantly in recovery. Well, I think that's true, period. Whether we're in, quote unquote recovery, and because, it's so easy to get caught up and forget what's real.
Oh, that is yes to everything you just said. I think it's a constant practice. Maybe one day I'll get to the place where some of these healthier ways of thinking, these healthier beliefs might be the more automatic. I'm not there yet. So I have to, step 11, keep up with the prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God. And then step 10 is a step that says we continue to take personal inventory. We're continuing to grow in effectiveness and understanding. So what that means is I have to watch out for the old codependent thoughts and try to see them. Oh, there I go again. I helped this person. Did I help this person because I truly want to be helpful, or am I helping this person because I want to prove what an awesome guy I am and how? So one thing I have to do to sort of keep in that conscious contact with God is always check my motives, because one of the things I think that distinguishes those of us in AlAnon who have friends and relatives of alcoholics versus alcoholics themselves, I think in the case of alcoholics, they get enough DUIs, they land in jail enough times.
They hit a hard bottom.
It's kind of obvious. Like, not always, but there's an obviousness to the destructiveness of their behavior that at least turns them on to the idea that, maybe I have a problem. My disease, my codependency disease, it only gets pats on the back. It gets praises. It gets attaboys. When I help and fix and save, that just gets, Randy, you're such a great guy. So I don't even know I'm sick. I think I'm just being a good person, and God will reward me. But so it's really imperative for someone with my disease to constantly check his motives, to make sure that I'm really doing it because I truly want to be helpful, or am I doing it because there's some egoic thing that I'm
now
going for.
Can you truly want to be helpful and also want to feel for yourself, better about yourself from not an egoic place?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Here's my litmus test. There's a slogan or a phrase we use in the program, and it's for fun and for free. What that means is, am I doing this thing because it really brings me joy, and that includes being helpful. So if you ask me, or let's say you're moving, and maybe you need some help moving, and either you ask me to help you move or I offer to help you move. Okay, am I doing it for fun and for free? Meaning, am I doing it because you know what? I really want to do this. Yeah. It'll be fun to be with Adrienne. It'll be fun to get some exercise. And I really like Adrienne. I really want to help her move. And I'm doing this because I really want to.
Yeah.
To me, that is my litmus test for giving and helping. Now, if you ask me to do something and I really don't want to do it, but I'm doing it, well, Adrienne won't like me if I don't help, or God won't think I can't think of myself as a good guy. Then that's not for fun and for free. There's an ulterior egoic motive. So I try to use that litmus test for fun and for free. When it comes to helping and really anything in my life.
I love that. I love that. And so steps 4 through 9, say again what those cover.
Yeah, sure. So step 4 took a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves, which is really a fancy way of saying, hey, let's start looking at what our beliefs are and some of the things and that we're clinging to.
Yeah.
And then step 5 is after we sort of put it on paper, we talk to a sponsor.
Right.
Because it's some of that stuff is like, I didn't really want to admit a lot of this stuff. It was embarrassing to sort of admit that I'm a codependent and that I have these attachments to work, or that I'm actually seeking out broken people. So to actually have the courage to admit that to another man was really, there's something really healing in that. So that's step 5. Step 6 became willing to have these character defects removed. They call it character defects, but really I refer to them being willing to do something different. And usually the way step 6 kind of works itself out is through my actions. So it's all well and good for me to say, oh, I'm codependent, and now I've told another man that I'm codependent. Well, and do I really want to change? I could give lip service to that, or do I, how do I start acting?
Right.
That's real. That's really going to determine how willing I am to change. So step 6, I think, is about sort of taking what we call contrary action, doing something different to prove, that you really want to change. Step 7 is ask God to remove our shortcomings. So it's like, listen, I have this. I'm addicted to my work. I'm attached to work. I've made it a higher power. You know what, God? whenever you're ready, I'm ready to have this thing removed, so you take it away. Because, I don't have the power to really change myself is one of the things we talk about. And then lastly, 8 and 9 is about sort of making amends to other people. I thought in my codependency that I really didn't do too much damage to anybody. And alcoholics, when they get DUIs and they have a lot of obvious amends to me, but who did I hurt?
Right.
You know what? When I look back on a lot of my relationships, when I needed people to be a certain way in order for me to be okay, and I demanded that they play certain roles, particularly girlfriends, that it's a form of emotional violence. Because I've come to believe one of the things that the course and 12 Steps has done is redefine my definition of love. Because I always thought love in a very codependent way was, well, you be who I need you to be, and fine, I'll be who you need you to be, and we'll both be miserable because neither of us is living the life we want to live. I have come to believe that love is allowing the people in our lives to just be exactly who they are and do exactly exactly what they want to do. And in my codependency, I didn't let people do that. I had expectations of them. I made demands on them. And when they didn't fulfill these expectations and demands, I would get angry. I'd play the victim. And so I realized when I got into recovery that, I did do a lot of damage to people, and I finally saw how difficult it must have been to be in a relationship with me when I'm foisting all those expectations on them. And so I did need to make amends. And when I did that, it really, it cleaned my side of the street up.
Wow, man.
And really, and that's when the awning that stood between me, that's the sunlight and me, really started to get peeled back.
You said something a minute ago. Did you say I don't have the power to change myself?
Yeah, that's one of the things. Powerlessness is one of the basic principles of the 12 steps. We're powerless over our disease. If we really had the power to sort of just magically change ourselves, we would change it. Like once I saw I was codependent and I saw how codependency was making my life unmanageable. Oh, well, great. I just won't be codependent anymore. Doesn't quite work that way.
Right now.
I'm just going to change it right now. Like if I had that power, I would, right? So we learned that, we really don't. We don't have the power to change ourselves. We need God's help. Our job is to sort of supply the willingness and to sort of do the next indicated action that's in front of us. But God's the one that ultimately is gonna heal us.
And that's one of the sort of the proof of God, for me, is healing, because I will do the work and, I want to heal. I want to change this within myself, and I'll be talking to God and doing my spiritual practice. And it's not that I did anything, all of a sudden I'm healed. All of a sudden I'm down the road. For me, that's one of the areas that's proof of God.
It is proof of God. And what if, just for fun, God maybe wants me to hold on to an old belief or old way of acting, because maybe that makes me relatable to someone else who might need help. I sometimes had this idea. I thought, well, God, look, if you take away all this baggage and all this stuff and turn me into this spiritual, enlightened, ascended master, I'll be your right-hand man, God. I will do it all, And I realized, and it's funny because I was actually saying that to God in one of my prayer sessions, and I heard a thought back, and the thought back was, well, if you were that, you wouldn't be all that useful to other people. You wouldn't be relatable to any. So in a way, I think maybe God needs us to just hold on to some of the egos so that we can help somebody else.
Right.
So, who knows?
Wow. So now, the A Course in Miracles, like I know you from a group that blends. Well, it's it's a Course in Miracles, but it's bringing a 12-step mindset to it. And so how do you see how do they complement each other for you?
I was just having a conversation with somebody about the Course and the 12 steps, and my friend referred to the Course. My friend referred to the Course as the graduate program after the 12 steps. I mean, that's like funny, and maybe that's true. I'll tell you what, I hit so after several years in AlAnon, I hit a plateau in my program. I was going to the same meetings. I was hearing a lot of the same things, listening to the same people, and it just felt flat. It felt like I don't want to say like, oh, now I have this whole 12-step thing down, so I don't need it anymore. I still do need the 12 steps, but I just felt like I had sort of heard everything there was to be heard, and I'd gotten a lot of the stuff out of the 12 steps, and I needed something else. And sure enough, like within that 2-week period when I started feeling that, someone came to me and said, hey, there's this thing called the Course in Miracles. Do you know anything about it? And I'd heard about it, and I'd even been exposed to some of the lessons before early in recovery. I didn't no idea what they meant, and I wanted nothing to do with them. But I was ready now. This was another moment where it was almost like another bottom, where like God was using that bottom to supply the willingness for something new. Because I don't know if things were going great in Al-Anon. I don't know if someone said, hey, you want to do this Course in Miracles? I might have been like, no, everything's great.
That.
I don't need this course. I'm doing fine in my 12-step program. But because I hit like another bottom, there was some more pain, more discomfort, hence more willingness for something new. And then all of a sudden, here's the Course. And, I was thinking, if I could sum up sort of in one idea what the Course has really, really done for me, even beyond the 12 steps, is going back to my whole codependency and all these things that I've used in my life to sort of fill this God-sized hole. What I've realized is my whole life, I've taken this world so seriously. Like everything is so important. If I get this client, oh my God, it's life or death. If I, if somebody dies, oh my God, it is life or death. But that's horrible. It's a tragedy. And if Trump's elected president over Hillary, oh my God, the world's everything, whether it's global or whether it's in my own personal life, has seemed so important. And the 12 steps never really addressed that all that much for me. But the Course, what the Course has done for me, and I'm so grateful for, is it has allowed me to let go a little bit more. And it does it with a very, very simple metaphysical premise of the Course, which is that none of this is really all that real. It's not all that real. It's not real anyway. And, and it's so funny, like they often say that the simplest ideas are the best. And I really think looking back now that I'm in the Course, I've always been looking for just give me some belief, give me some reason why it would be okay to just let go of this death grip on the world and to let go of control. And the Course supplied the simplest idea of all, because this is not real.
Right.
And I'm like, duh, okay, that's, and so it really has resonated with me. And I'm very intellectual in the way I sort of approach even spirituality. It's just kind of the way I process things. And so the way you're going to get to me is by sort of making logical sense to me.
Yes.
And the way the 12 steps, there's a section in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous called We Agnostics. And it makes this very intellectual and logical case why it makes sense to actually believe in a God or a higher power. It wasn't just like, grab some crystals and put them in a circle and you'll believe in God. It was like, it goes through this whole logical reason why it made sense. I'm like, cool, man. I get that.
What's the reason?
It says, it talks about all the other things that we can't see or feel that we believe in. It uses this idea of a steel gird, and there are electrons running running through them. I can't see them,
Yeah.
but I have absolute faith that there are electrons running. So why would I not believe that there's something else? Well, that makes sense to me.
Right.
You know? And the Course, there's a logical consistency that I find in the Course that supports the idea that, oh yeah, I could see why this isn't real and why it makes sense that there is this heaven that we're actually all in, and this is all just a dream. And so what the Course has done is it's really allowed me to let go. I'm not going to tell you that I still don't have my moments. You should have seen me this last week with work. I had some fear, around it, but a lot less.
Yeah.
You know?
And you probably get through it a lot faster when things come up.
Yes, I get through it a lot faster, And so, so that's, I think, the biggest thing that the Course has. It's almost like a relay race, like you're running and then you pass the baton, and I feel like the 12 steps have taken me somewhere. And by the way, again, I love the 12 steps. I will always need the 12 steps along with the Course. So I don't want to give the misimpression that I am now that I've the Course, I don't need any 12 steps. But I think the Course has sort of taken the baton and taken it even further.
Do you remember any of the books that you said that were suggested to you that you read?
Yeah. One of the books was a book called Proof of Heaven.
Oh, I was just thinking about that book.
You know that book by Dr. Eben Alexander. And, this goes to the intellectual, logical side of me. So, he describes this wonderful realm outside of the body and this love and all this stuff. And now my ego, my doubting Thomas wothis say, oh, well, that's just his brain doing things.
Right, because he was in a coma.
He was in a coma and all this near-death experience stuff. It's just the brain doing weird stuff that doesn't really exist. Like, that's what my ego wants me to believe. But what was so amazing about that book is because he was a neurosurgeon, he could say it could not have been my brain because my brain wasn't working at that moment because of the I think it was a meningitis that he had. I think
so too. Yeah. I'm not 100%, but
so
I think
like,
so.
Oh, my ego had no way to sort of disbelieve what he's talking about. Now my ego did have one more thing to say. It said, well, he's making this all up so he can make money selling books, but he was a neurosurgeon. He was making tons and tons of and by almost writing this book, he risked ridicule among his fellow doctors
and did receive some.
So what was so great about that book was it just gave my ego no room to doubt what he was saying was true.
And didn't something happen at the end, like something?
His sister?
I don't remember because I didn't read the entire book. I actually interviewed him because he came here to talk. He was at Holy Innocents Church to talk. So I interviewed him for a story on the phone beforehand. Yeah.
How cool. There was something that, like he had a sister that he never knew, and somehow he was able to connect the dots in this afterlife. But just that book, just the idea that there's like, oh my God, there really is like I have like, my ego cannot doubt the presence of something greater,
no question.
And so that was such a huge book for me. I've read a couple of Buddhist books as well. There's a book by Jack Kornfield. He's an American Buddhist monk. It's called A Path with Heart.
Oh.
And there's another book by an American Buddhist nun, Pema, I don't want to mispronounce her name, but Shodron, I believe is how it's pronounced. It's called The Places That Scare You. And it's just more very 12-step like, but from a Buddhist perspective, it's all about non-attachment and sort of identifying your attachments and working through them. And so they have been some of the Buddhist literature has been really, really helpful to me as well.
So can you talk about your profession a little bit and how how that feeds into your spirit, your spirituality.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, my profession was all about ego. You know, I don't know if I ever really cared about. Yeah, you know what? I mean, I don't think I cared about my clients. I think I cared, like, they were means for me to make money and to gain prestige. But you know, now I'm not going to say I don't make money. I still, you know, this is still a profession. But you know, I now see them. And I see my clients in a different light, and I love the, you know, the prayer in the Course in Miracles. You know, I'm only here to be truly helpful,
right?
And because we're all one, they're me,
right?
You know, they're not these separate bodies, and like, you know, there's me, the lawyer, and you, the client, and you know, I had a client who he had a girlfriend, was very jealous of her, and he stabbed her to death. And I remember going through the case, and I had this egoic idea in my head. I was like, well, thank heavens I'm not him. You know, I mean, thank heavens, I would never do anything like that. And that's true. I would never do anything physically violent. But I had a God moment as I sat quietly, and what the thought that came to me was, you're not all that different from him, Randy. You know, he was codependent, and he obviously had a violent streak, and it manifested in this awful, awful way. But you know what? You were just as codependent, and you just happened to have circumstances that you're not a violent individual. But had I been him, had I lived his life, grown up the way he did, had his brain chemistry, his
been in his life circumstances, right?
I would have
you
done
might
that.
Have reacted.
And I know what it's like to be jealous and codependent. And so I had this real moment of compassion for this guy. That doesn't mean that, I mean, I did my best for him, and unfortunately we didn't necessarily win. But but my point, you know, so he's going to have to suffer the consequences of his actions. But I had compassion for him, you know, and same with, you know, I represent a lot of individuals who come from gangs, and there's a lot of violence, and they're part of that. And it, you know, first egoic thought is, well, thank heavens I'm not anything like them.
Right.
Well, you know what? What if I grew up in a neighborhood that was that was infested with gangs, where the only way you could stay safe was to join a gang, and the only way you could sort of remain in that gang is by doing what they told you. What if, Randy, what if you were in a position where you felt like you had no other choice but to do that? Things might be very different for me, you know? And so now I get to sort of use my profession and the work I do to sort of find common ground and compassion. And
you feel more like you're really doing a service.
And I'm doing a service. You know, and I've done a couple of pro bono cases recently. You know, there was one guy I represented who I really believed was innocent. I really, really, really believed it. And I took his case on pro bono, and we were able to get his conviction reversed. And again, you know, but I had to ask myself the motive question before. Am I doing this to prove how awesome I am, or am I doing this because I really, really wanted to help? And I had to sit with that for a couple days. And fortunately, I got the answer that, you know, no, I really want to do this. I really want to help them.
Because first of all, to me, to be a defense attorney, that takes a special something to me. And not to feed your ego.
Yeah, right. Well,
but I want to say something first. And what is it I want to say? Oh, that it seems like it's also, I mean, I know we're all human, but it seems like you are able to at least want to be non-judgmental, which to me is really huge.
Yeah.
You know? So go on. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, that definitely, you know, it's helping me, because I can be my ego wants to be judgmental. My ego, that's one of the things I've been attached to, is judgment. If I get to judge you, if I get to put you down enough, I get to build myself up enough. You know, like that one client I was telling you about. Well, I get to, by sort of saying I'm nothing like him, it's my way of artificially raising myself up. So my work, but only through the lens of spirituality is it helping me sort of cut through judgment even more.
About 20 plus years ago, I was living in New York, and it was after OJ. I was at the time, I thought OJ was innocent, and I was glad that there was a not guilty verdict. So I wanted to do something about this, and I went and volunteered with the Innocence Project. And so what I was doing was I would get the letters. I would read the letters from the prisoners, and then I would fill out an evaluation form about what they said. And basically, I don't think I had to make an opinion, come to a conclusion, but I had to say something. I had to impart something, I think, on this form. And I'm saying that because it was very hard for me to not be judgmental, because often these were like child abusers. And so that is like a real thing for me. And so what I ended up doing was just follow the directions. Just do what I'm supposed to do, because I didn't know how to suspend my judgment. And I did try to maybe read the letters in a different way, from a different perspective. I mean, it was really something, but I was 100% aware that I'm being judgmental, and this is really hard, and you don't even deserve any help from this place.
Oh, I know.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
And then I just said, well, I'm here for a reason, and just do what the form says. And that's what I did. You know what?
I think that's what spiritual growth is. It's going back to the steps. Mm-hmm. It's not about like, well, Adrian, now that I see that I'm judgmental, I'm never going to be judgmental again. It's not that, I don't think either of us have the power to like ever make us non-judgmental, but I think our job's just to see it. I really think it's just to see, just like you saw it, just like I see it pop up, and I think that's our job, is to just, okay, here I go again. Here's
the awareness of it.
Awareness of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I think the Holy Spirit, as the Course would say, uses all these circumstances to sort of bring up all that stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe the Holy Spirit puts you in that, through the OJ case, it moved you to, to join the Innocence Project, and then you're doing this, and then wow.
Yeah.
You're a lot of this stuff is coming up for you. Same with me.
Well, so I wonder if you have an answer to something relating to what you just said. Like I used to be in a place, and I was going to AlAnon, 20 years ago. I would go to AlAnon sometimes, meetings. And I remember feeling like, okay, I have an awareness. Now what? Like I would just feel like, what good is that? So what? I have an awareness. And I don't know how I got past that. Like I somehow broke through that, like over years. What do you say about that?
Well, because I so get what you're saying, because the controlling nature of me is like, okay, now I see I have this codependency, I have this judgment. Now I'm ready to fix it, like now, like, okay, let's just give me whatever tools I need. Like if you need me to run around in a circle 3 times and chant this, and, and like, I'll just do it and make it go away.
Yeah.
And I think so much of, I was going to say 12-step work, but I think even the Course is just sitting with the discomfort of not being able to fix,
That's true.
It's,
let it be what it is.
Yeah. And that's because, that there's,
that's true.
Yeah. There's a lot of control that I just desperately want to have. And I think, there's one book I'm reading, it's a great book, by a guy named Rami Shapiro. It's called Recovery, the Sacred Art. And he goes through the 12 steps, but his main thing that he just hammers throughout the book is, whatever we're addicted to, whether it's alcohol, food, sex, drugs, the real thing we're addicted to is control.
It is. It's such a major thing.
Yeah. So I see this, I'm like, okay, and now I'm ready to take the reins and fix it. And
Yeah.
like, what if that's not what it's about? Whether if it's just sitting
Just
with
let it be there.
Yeah, let
you
it be
can't
there.
control
Yeah.
it. Let it be what it is. That's even harder than surrender, I think.
Ooh,
You know?
I agree.
Those are two different things.
I think they are two different things. Yes. Yes.
But that is very healing too. I mean, because when that idea was first introduced to me, I was like, I'll do it, but I don't want to. You know?
I know exactly how you feel. That's such a great way of putting it.
But
yeah.
I was surprised. I felt an even deeper connection to God when I did that. Say the person who suggested that I do it like in meditation, and
Okay.
I was surprised at the deeper connection I felt to God by just being in that hurt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's good. It's really good though. Yeah.
I have questions that I like to ask my guests.
All right.
And before we close, I would like to ask you. You kind of answered this early on, but I'm going to ask you again.
Go for it.
How would you describe your knowing of God today?
That is a really, really great question. In fact, I was actually thinking about this. So step 3 says, turn our will and our lives over to the care of a God of our understanding. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, I'm going to develop this idea of what God is. God's this, and he's this, he's a little bit of this, a little bit of this. That's going to be my understanding, and I'm going to turn it over to God. Well, I've come to believe that I heard an AA speaker say something that was so profound. Let me see if I can get this right without bastardizing it. He goes, if God is small enough for me to understand and know, then he's not big enough for me to trust. And so I think God and my knowing what God is or understanding of what God is, I think God has to be just a little outside of my understanding. God almost has to exist in the I don't know realm. Mm-hmm. I think the moment I start knowing God and understanding God according to this thing that God's no longer big enough for me to sort of like turn my will over to. He's just got to be outside of my understanding.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I have to keep not being able to know God in order for me to trust God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
because otherwise it's sort of a trap we set for ourselves.
Yeah, there's just something about the unknown of what God is and what God's doing and what it's all about that just allows me to sort of be like, okay, I don't know, so I'm going to trust.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if I think
wonderful.
I know, I'm going to start fitting things into things and controlling more.
Exactly.
So.
When do you most feel the presence of the Spirit of God?
It's in stillness and quiet. I'm sure a lot of people would probably say that, but it really, it's in those moments of, like I said, for me, walking meditations are really, really helpful for me. I love to go. There's a seminary near my house, and there's some really beautiful grounds, and I'll take my dogs for a walk, and I just kind of just enjoy it, and then I really start feeling the presence of God, and that's when I start getting the thoughts and things coming into me. So it's just when I get quiet.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think God calls you to do for yourself and others through your work?
I think it's, I really think it's just for me to be myself. And when I say that the next question is, well, how do I know I'm being who I truly am? And I believe, and I think Wayne Dyer might have even talked about this, like joy is my barometer for how I know I'm being true to myself. And that goes hand in hand, I think, with the idea for fun and for free. If I am doing something because it's truly just bringing me joy, then I think I'm being myself. And I think that's my compass for yeah, this is what God wants me to do to
Right.
help. For instance, I'll just give you another example. I love animals.
Mm-hmm.
I love dogs and
Right.
cats and all kinds of animals. And every summer I take my daughter on a volunteer vacation out in Utah, and we volunteer at an animal sanctuary.
Oh.
And I love it. I have so much fun. It's a great bonding experience. But for me and my daughter, we're like cleaning up poop and and cleaning enclosures, and we're doing stuff that others may not view as very, very, very fun. But I just love it, and my daughter and I have a great time. It brings me such joy. We have it actually in a couple of weeks from now, our annual vacation, and I know that's what God wants me to do, because I find such joy and purpose in working with animals and volunteering and stuff like that. And there are other volunteer opportunities that may not jazz me as much or don't speak to me as much as that. But I'm sure there are other people that speaks to them. And so I feel like use joy as your compass. What really speaks to your heart, and what just like brings you like pizzazz in your life.
Wow.
So that's what I try to do.
That's incredible. It's so true. It's so true. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it.
It's really then because I think that's not what you're meant to do. God doesn't want us to sacrifice.
Right.
It's not what this world's about. I used to think that. That the harder, the worse it was, and the more miserable the experience was, the more I was like proving to God how much I was being helpful.
Tell me about a time, if you can, when you had a miracle or a blessing and you said, God totally did this. I had nothing to do with it.
Wow. I have a couple. I'll give you the most recent one. And it goes with dogs and animals. About 2 years ago, my dog died. And I work primarily out of my home office. And my wife's working, my daughter's at school. So it was me and my dog. I mean, my dog, I probably spent more time with that dog than I did with anybody else in my life. And so when my dog died, I mean, Adrian, I'm telling you, this was about as deep a grief as I ever felt in my life. I mean, it was awful. And about 3 days after my dog died, the grief was so intense. And I don't know why I did this. I fell to my knees, and I didn't ask God for anything. I just said, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, but it was something like, I am in so much pain, God. I have never felt grief like that. I'm through tears. I mean, just like, oh my, tears going through my face. Like, I am in such pain. I've never felt anything like this. And in a second, the grief vanished, just vanished. Now, I still had moments of sadness afterwards, but the intensity, like to the point where I didn't know how I was going to function, just went away in that moment, to the point where like I looked up and I'm like, oh my God,
wow,
what just happened? Like I didn't do anything. I just fell to my knees and
in tears,
and it just went away. That intense grief.
That's beautiful.
It was amazing.
Wow.
I still am amazed how it happened. Yeah. So that's my most recent experience.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So would you call yourself a seeker and a healer, or a seeker or a healer?
That's a really good question too. Okay. Being a codependent.
Yes.
I think I have to be a seeker. And if healing comes from my seeking, because I'm seeking and I'm growing spiritually, and I'm experiencing more joy, and my joy is spilling out to everybody else, and healing, great. That I'm all for that. But if I make healing my goal, that's dangerous ground for a codependent like me, because I go back, then I become the fixer, saver, healer again, so I think I have to, in AlAnon, we talk about, we have to put the focus on ourselves, we need to develop our own spiritual growth and let and let that sort of be contagious for everybody else rather than trying to fix everybody else's spiritual growth.
Right.
Others, and by the way, that's not true for everybody. I think some people can be healers and be very healthy with that.
Yeah.
But a codependent like me, I need to focus on myself, seek my own spirituality, develop my own conscious contact with God, allow the joy to develop, and let healing almost be a byproduct. You know, in fact, I don't even need to know if I'm healing. You know?
Yeah. You seem like you're in such a great place. I mean, do you like say sometimes, you know, I'm really in a great place right now?
Yeah. I've more and more, I'm happy to report that I am in a really good place. But I have my days, in moments where I'm not above fear, and I'm not above ego and making the body real. But thanks to the course, and thanks to the 12 steps, and some of the other, thanks to so many of the people such as yourself who I have met who inspire me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's there's no way I could do any of this by myself. There's no way I could just like pick up the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and pick up the Course in Miracles, read it,
and say, okay, I get it.
Now I'm healed. Like, I need all of you, and thanks to all of you, and I'm having a lot more better days, you know. And when I say better days, not because all the lights are green and everything's working out. Even days when they don't work out, I can still have a good day. That is something that I never was able to do in the first 40 some odd years of my life. You know, I can find happiness and joy from within, regardless of what's happening outside of me.
I mean, that's where we're all trying to get to. That's wonderful.
Not every day, but a lot more. Yeah, a lot more.
Well, thank you so much, Randy.
Oh, thank you.
This has been wonderful.
This really has been so much fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, listen to all of our episodes on our podcast channel on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and send me that email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. Let's start healing.